You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Welcome to the podcast. We have on a very special guest today I'm super excited about. We have on Hallie Lambert. She is the executive story editor on The Expanse. She's a screenwriter. She's worked on Grimm and even CSI. Hallie, thanks for being on with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So you've climbed the ranks in the screenwriting world, and I think you're the perfect person to talk to about this, on how to get into the game of screenwriting and how to just kind of excel at it, that your path doesn't have to end as a screenwriter, especially if you get on a show. Before we dive into that, though, I would love to get your origin story.
Sure. I grew up in a small town out in the middle of nowhere outside Seattle, and loved writing stories and writing from, the moment I could pick up a crayon, I would be drawing little pictures and writing stories and trying to sell them at the farmer's market. And but I was my parents were more of a get outside and play sort of a family than watch television or movies. And so I didn't view a whole lot growing up. I had my few favorites like X-Files or Seinfeld or those shows. But it was mostly like a get outside and play. So I loved writing and went into journalism thinking that was the career path of getting a job. It never occurred to me that television films had to be written by somebody, and that was a job too. So I pursued journalism and had to take a screenwriting class at Chapman University when I transferred there in Southern California here. And it just hit me like a thunderbolt that this was the medium that I was meant to write for. This is what I'd been looking for. So I changed my major from journalism into screenwriting, and that's where I graduated from Chapman in screenwriting. And started doing background work, and while I got out of school looking for a job, I had an internship at a management company and did background work to make some money. And while I was doing background work, I was on CSI, and I was like, I really want to get in the writer's room. If are there any openings, just let me know. Here's my resume. I'm really eager to do that. And the Post people brought me in for an interview, and I was able to come on as the writer's PA for the third season of CSI.
That's amazing. So
that was like lucky, but you never know where those opportunities might arise, or just kind of really trying to put yourself out there. And I mean, there's no one pathway into getting your foot in the door. And mine just happened to be doing insert work on CSI and saying, I really want a job in the writer's room.
I think that's amazing. So you came in as an extra and then just kind of networked around and saw an opportunity and took advantage of it, which you have to do. Getting into that writer's PA position, did you have already like a portfolio of scripts that you needed? No,
okay. I didn't. I mean, people might be looking for that nowadays. This was a long time ago, but I just was very eager and had a good attitude and was fine with running coffee and learning the ropes, because it was, my first real job in entertainment out of school. And so, just you got to be willing to pay those dues, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think attitude is everything. People want to work with people who want to work. And if you show up, you've got the right attitude, they know you by reputation of Hallie's a hard worker and she's got a good head on her shoulders. That can be enough. And obviously it's paid off because, you've worked your way up the chain. So from CSI, where did we go?
That's where I met Narain Shankar, who's a showrunner, executive producer of a number of shows that I started working for him then as after PA. He's like, we got along really well. And he's like, would you come on, be my assistant, my executive assistant there?
Wow.
So I moved into that role at CSI and worked with him for about 4 seasons there.
Okay. Nice, steady work.
Yeah, it was good. And I learned a ton. And he was very open of like, I was writing a spec for CSI and wanting to read it. But at the same time, when all this was happening, I was getting all these great opportunities that people would kill for. I was existentially going, oh my God, what if I fail? This is all I've ever wanted in writing. I'm going to give up before I even have a chance to fail.
So every screenwriter, basically.
Yes, pretty much.
Excellent.
But I was at the point where I was like, I'm going to leave here. I'm going to try acting and write and figure out my path. It was just one of those early 20s sort of thing. And so I gave up my job at CSI and I learned a lot about myself. I don't know if it's something I would recommend somebody doing
right.
when you're in such a great role. But I eventually decided to go back to school for psychology. I was going to be a psychologist and do that instead because I didn't want to fail as a screenwriter.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, screenwriting is a lot of psychology. You have to understand what somebody's thinking, their personality, what is driving their actions. So yes, I understand that you walked away from a gig, and I'm sure there's some writers going, how could she? But I totally get it because that is what you needed to do. You needed to see if that was the right path for you. And sometimes you have to walk away from something to realize that's what you need to be doing, because you don't want to go the rest of your life thinking, well, maybe I should have tried psychology. So I think I totally get it. And you probably became a better screenwriter for it.
I'd like to think so. I feel like what you said exactly, it really brought me back to what the only thing I really wanted was to write. And as much as I loved learning the psychology and it really helps inform my writing, it brought me back to writing is it. And I was still, while I was in school, I went back to work with Narain on other shows and was his assistant. And I was going to school at night and graduated. And finally I was like, okay, this next show we go on, I want to be the writer's assistant. I'm ready now. Like I'm ready to pursue the screenwriting career. And because if I don't, I've already failed with not trying. And so that was one of the things that I was missing earlier. And the next show we ended up working on was The Expanse. So luckily I came in as writer's assistant there. I got a freelance script the second season, and then came on as staff writer the third season, moved up to story editor and then executive story editor. And that's kind of where we are now. Okay.
I want to break this down stage by stage, if you don't mind. All right. So first of all, you went to school and you were able to recover after school. You're able to not burn any bridges. You stayed in good graces. You kept relationships open. And that was able to provide you opportunity to get staffed on another show, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Smart. Well, because I know people that burn bridges. I know people like that's the only way they can walk away from something is to demonize that other person so they can justify their own decisions. Right. And that's the last thing you want to do in this business.
Exactly. But Narain Shankar is an incredible human being and really, gracious and supportive. So I was very lucky to have run into him early in my career. And I've been very lucky to have worked with really great people over the years and don't really have a lot of those horror stories that you hear about.
Well,
I'm sure there might be plenty to come in the career, but thus far.
I don't believe in luck. I believe in hard work and taking advantage of opportunities. And if you're a hard worker and you see an opportunity, you take advantage of that. I believe you're blazing your own path. Personally, that's my belief. Only because I've run into it, and people could say, "Well, you're incredibly lucky." I was like, "Well, I've been putting in the time." So, all right. So you went into being a writer's PA. And then you were a writer's assistant. So can we just talk about the differences there between being a writer's, or is that the same thing?
Writer's PA is very different than a writer's assistant. Writer's PA is basically doing everything you can to make the writers and executive producers' life easier. Is getting lunches, getting all the snacks.
You're like a gopher.
A big thing. A gopher,
yeah.
Yes. And hopefully, if you're in the right room, you're able to kind of learn the ropes. Like on The Expanse, our writer's PA was very lucky and able to sit in the room with us, which doesn't happen a lot on a lot of shows. But you can kind of be part of the process and learn. So if you're open to that, like you're able to gain a lot of experience, even though you're doing all the grunt work, basically.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I know people who would love to be a gopher, go for this, go for that, and then peek your head into the writer's room, right? I mean, that's 100% what you'd want to do. So you became a writer's assistant. Walk us through that.
And then a writer's assistant is, again, trying to make the writers and executive producers' life easier by taking lots of good notes. Maybe you're the person writing on the whiteboard, or putting together helping to put together written bios on characters, or it's runs the gamut of a bunch of different things.
Are they letting you touch the script? Are they letting you touch the script? Are they letting you clean it up?
Sometimes some rooms might give you like the outline. They might, let you touch that, or it really depends on the showrunner.
Okay.
I've heard of, when I was a writer's assistant, that's when they gave me my first script as a freelance. So sometimes that happens.
Well, I want to hear that moment you got your first script.
Our room was, we'd go to drinks a lot afterwards. So we'd walk up the street and go to our favorite Gulf Stream, and we'd have our little table there and we'd have drinks, and we were just around. And the showrunner, Noreen, said, "So we've decided this episode, the next episode, 209 it was, you're going to write it." And I was like, "What?" It was like, I almost started, I think, crying. I was like really in shock, a little terrified at the same time, but like excited and terrified. And then when on our walk back, I called my parents and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm writing the next episode." And it was a
big deal.
Incredible moment. Yeah.
It's huge.
Cool. Very cool.
So were you feeling the pressure then of like, I have to write in these characters' voices. I have to make sure that the relationships are consistent with all of the other episodes?
Yes. It was super anxiety producing.
Really? Of course. You're going to feel pressure.
Even though I know I was with a bunch of people who are very supportive and encouraging, and you have to remember that the showrunner, the people around you want you to succeed. They're not going to give you something and hope that you fail at it. They want you to succeed in writing the script, and hopefully they're supportive in that too. And, and the experience you've had in the room should contribute to hopefully being able to write in those voices. And, the showrunner usually takes a pass at it at the end too. It's really trying to get the best draft possible for then the showrunner to have to do the littlest amount of work once you turn in your draft.
Are you outlining that episode with the showrunner? Is the episode already provided as far as like the beats and everything, the act outs and all of that, and then you get in there and you really kind of roll your sleeves up?
Yeah, the writer's room, whether it's 4, 12, how many people it is, usually we'll break out the story and the outline all together, and really pinpoint every little thing. So usually you'll have a very detailed outline.
Nice.
By the time you go to script. So it's really filling in everything. I like to say that you have all the good bone structure for the script. You just have to fill in all the flesh.
Oh, I love that. That's a wonderful analogy. Thank you for that. So I got to ask, how many writers in the writers' room on The Expanse?
We had, I think first season, I think it was 12. We had 2 writing teams. I'd have to go back and count, but I think it was like 12. This last season, we only had 5 because it was COVID and all that stuff.
Right.
So it wasn't a very small room. But
was it a room or were they doing it over Zoom?
Zoom. It was a Zoom.
It was a Zoom room.
It was a smaller room. Okay. But it's been pretty consistent over the years as far as the same people. We've had a couple new people come and go, but
can I dish with you for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, so was there a big change on The Expanse between Sci-Fi and Amazon? Was there a big shift there?
It didn't feel like a big shift. I mean, the cancellation and the getting like all that experience, those 2 weeks leading up to getting picked up by Amazon was, that was overwhelming and a big deal. But we had a pretty established show already. That had a great fan base. And I don't think Amazon really wanted to push in and try to change it too much. They were really great partners and advocates for the show. I mean, they had their notes and their input as like any network would.
Yeah.
But it was a really great, I think, support system from everything I heard and witnessed. Anyway, I'm not the showrunner, so he may have different experiences, but everything I saw and witnessed,
from your perspective, it was pretty smooth. So my wife loves the show. I enjoy the show. She loves the books, right? So she's reading the books. She's got, I think there's 7 or 8 books she's reading.
Yeah.
And then she reads the book. She goes, I just want to let you know, season 5 is bang on. So I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So you guys are doing a heck of a job. So after writer's assistant, where did we go?
So I got that script, and then I got a staff writing position for the next season, which is, you're not always guaranteed a script, depending on the room and the showrunner and many things. I was lucky enough to get another script that season, but it's really, it's the entry level job as a writer on a show. And it's just a real learning curve and you don't have to overspeak in the room. You don't want to speak too much. You don't want to speak too little. It's kind of finding that happy medium of being an asset, but making the showrunner's life easier and not harder.
I mean, is it a little political, right? So you come on as the new writer, and then there's writers that are senior writers, and they're like looking at this new talent type of a thing.
It may be. I mean, I have not been a senior writer, so I don't know, but I would hope not. I felt like the rooms that I've been in have been pretty inclusive. There definitely is a hierarchy, but I think everybody in the room is hopefully wanting the show to succeed. So everybody should be wanting to work together.
It's about the team. It's about the team. It's about the project. It's not about you. It's about how do you create value and provide a service to the room, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And you have to learn that dynamic.
Yes, very much so.
Amazing. So
you have to play well with others.
Well, yeah. Can you imagine being in a room like with 4 other writers trying to make this thing happen, and you're the odd man out? That would be awful.
I've witnessed that. It's tough to witness that.
Yeah, and uncomfortable and cringy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah.
So we went from being a staff writer. So where are we now?
A story editor, and I'm. That's the next level, and then executive story editor after that, which you're going from lower level to mid-level writer in the hierarchy of things. The job doesn't change too much between staff writer and story editor. I mean, it's kind of the title is a misnomer. You're not really going through and being the editor of all the stories. It's still a collaborative room experience. It's more delineating the hierarchy.
Well, walk me through it. So a staff writer works on the overall story and works on an individual episode when they have a chance. What is the story editor doing for that process?
Pretty much the same thing as a staff writer. They're just one level.
Gotcha.
Just like moving up the rung. It's more of a title showing what year you're at. Like in high school, or what level you're at.
You're not quashing bad ideas.
You can sometimes. I've found that when I was story editor or executive story editor, sometimes I would be the go-between or the encouragement for a new staff writer, because they feel like they can come to you and maybe run ideas by you before saying them out to the showrunner or things like that. So sometimes that happens, which is, so you're not quite the newbie, but you're not up there at the senior level yet.
You're like the Obi-Wan. That's awesome. That's awesome. You're like a mentor character. So, I mean, for me, it feels like you're working your way towards your own show eventually.
Yeah, I mean, for personally, I would like that. That's what my direction and goal is. Not everybody wants to do that. Some people just want to work their way up and be a producer or an co-executive producer, and just write. Granted, I feel like I would love to have my own show, but I would love to like co-showrun it with somebody else. I know that job as showrunner is an incredibly tough job.
It seems like it's overwhelming. And to see one person running a show, to me, is incredible. I've seen a lot of people come together and break up the responsibility and be able to handle it and still have a life.
Exactly. I'm fine with sharing responsibility and having creative collaboration.
Yeah. So. Wonderful. All right. So what kind of advice do you have for writers out there listening who are interested in getting into television? And this is why I ask, writers, a lot of the screenwriters, the dream is to be, that career writer. And as for writing features, it's very, peaks and valleys. You have a lot of peaks and valleys as a feature writer. You might option one, you might sell one, then you could have a dry spell for a couple of years. So it's difficult to, quote, be a career screenwriter. But in television, it's different. If you can get on a solid show, you make a good reputation, you can then find yourself networking onto multiple shows, which is what I've noticed through your career. So what would you recommend for that new screenwriter looking to get into television?
Let me say it still is kind of a feast or famine. Television writing still is
good
a bit of that, especially with the shorter seasons and the smaller rooms, with all the streaming. Network shows going 23 episodes. That's not as common anymore. And so there are a lot of still peaks and valleys, unless you are the big name who are just going from show to show and you have, which is a relatively small, group of people.
Yeah.
But it's a really hard question, because there's no real one way. There's no real one school you have to go to, or one way to break in. And those jobs, those early jobs, whether it's an executive assistant, a PA, are tough to get. I'm mentoring some people from Chapman, some students from Chapman, and they're like, what can we do to get in? I'm like, just keep writing, get some great samples, find a writers group if you can, work with other writers at your level, because people, like, writers tend to come up together.
Yes.
So a lot of the writers who are show running are working with their other writer friends that they've spent years with, or, you kind of come up together. It doesn't feel that way when you're all unemployed and you're like all wanting to break in, but that's kind of the direction it goes. And on also taking the job at, I know to get a lot of executive assistant positions, which is a great way to kind of step in for if you're working for a writer, or in development, is start if you're just out of school trying to get a job at an agency or on a desk there, because a lot of people, showrunners and writers, really want assistants that have that kind of experience of like knowing the players in the business and kind of just a general idea. So that was, I mean, the showrunner I worked with and a couple others, they like to have that sort of, on the resume.
Oh, it's good to know.
But it's the same old, just write and keep trying to get those samples together and networking and, Twitter seems like it's been a good, a writer Twitter. I kind of lurk on there. I don't really post much, but it seems to be a great
following
place
people
for new writers. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for a hard question that you said, this was an incredible answer. So, I mean, thank you for that. And basically what I'm hearing is the rising tide lifts all ships, and if you're, writers are coming up together, and I think that's very true. I know in my community I have a couple of close friends that I've been writing with for a long time, and we're always looking out for each other, and it is really nice to have a community like that. Hallie, is there anything else I haven't asked you that I might have missed that I should have asked you?
Can't think of anything. Put me on the spot. I don't know.
The whole episode is you on the spot. So, well, thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.